I have the unenviable task of trying to close a day of wide-ranging conversations that has been truly global in nature. I note that we have representatives here who have spoken, who come from all 6 continents on which there is a school or a university or a permanent settlement. And I have appreciated your engagement throughout the day and also the questions that have come from the audience. One thing that strikes me is that there has been a lot of conversation, especially at the start of the day. We were hit very, very hard with questions about technology, jobs, and disruption. And it makes me think of one of my favorite mythical figures from the Honorable Member Bashir's jurisdiction, Yorkshire, Mr. Ned Ludd. 200 years ago, Ned Ludd, an apprentice weaver, burned down his office, which had weaving machines, because he was going to be put out of work by technology. It has spawned a term and a movement, the Luddites, coming out of which town? Huddersfield. Coming out of Huddersfield in Yorkshire. And the Luddites were intense believers that technology was going to destroy the world. What are the lessons of the Luddites? Today, we use Luddite as a derogatory term. Why? Because what we've learned over the past 200 years is that with technology has actually come better livelihoods and more jobs. But that does not mean that the changes wrought by technology were not painful, temporary dislocations for the communities that were served by the previous economic structure. I believe that the 4th Industrial Revolution will be like those that have come before it. It will create a higher standard of living. It will create new jobs. It can create better jobs than those which we have had before. But the lesson of the Luddites that I think we don't talk about often enough is the lesson for education. See, when the Luddites and the Industrial Revolution came along, we actually rebuilt an education system around that industrial model, and then we left it. We are still modeled fundamentally around the Prussian model of education from that 19th century. And we allowed technological change to continue without investing, as Tony put eloquently this morning, in the education R&D function that would be so critical to ensuring that the pain felt by Ned Ludd and his friends would not be replicated in our times. It is our responsibility as stakeholders in education, I believe, to put ourselves in front of the curve, to build the skills in advance of when they are needed, or when they are needed, and not long after they are needed, or not at all. As I listened to the talks today, I took away 4 key lessons that I felt that I could share. The first is that quite evidently the future demands different skills and different ways of teaching and learning than those which have been demanded by the past. I think of Elisa's graph showing the number of connected devices versus versus the number of people in the global population. Right? I think about the conversation about skills and the idea, the core idea that I take away is that we know that the college degree as we know it has never been less valuable than it is today, and it is growing less valuable every single day. But the flip side is that I believe skills themselves and learning have never been more important than they are today. A commitment to lifelong learning is fundamental if we are going to keep pace with technology, and we must ask ourselves, how are we investing in and enabling lifelong learning and building in learners at every level the capacity to teach themselves? the autodidactic capacity that is necessary for the future. The second core lesson that I took from the conversations today was that intention and authenticity matter. Intention and authenticity matter. We heard from people who have amazing classrooms, who work in amazing schools, who have built transformative organizations. It struck me that as they described those places, they described places in which teachers and learners and community members were existing with a sense of shared purpose, a common intention around their work. Furthermore, they are doing work that is deeply authentic and meaningful to them, and therefore generates the drive and aspiration to continue to learn. I think about Kuhn's example of the sustainability projects launched all over the globe. Why did they matter? They mattered because they were authentic. And we know that too much of the work that is happening in schools is inauthentic. And too many of our schools exist without a sense of shared purpose or intention. How will we invest in intention and authenticity across education? My third key idea was that we have to start small and bridge the gap. It strikes me that so many of the innovations that we've seen have actually happened outside the education system or the public education system as we know it, and have happened in formal or informal spaces in which we have tested models, failed quickly, and discovered things that work. The Teach for All example, Anna put up a number of innovators who have emerged from Teach for All programs and are now scaling solutions across a sector. We heard about affordable private schools. We heard about leadership academies spawned out of leadership academies. But one of the questions is, how do we bridge the gap? How do we create communities that actually identify the things that truly matter in education, identify experiments that are working, shine a light on them, and create an environment, an enabling environment to scale those ideas up to larger and larger and larger numbers of learners, lifelong learners, across the world. And I think there's a role for every single one of us, whether we are currently a student, a worker, a retiree, an educator, an investor, a philanthropist, a policymaker, to work together in creating an enabling environment that will allow those small-scale interventions that are working to grow, and to grow at an accelerating rate to meet the needs and the accelerating needs of our future. But my final takeaway actually goes back to the gentleman in yellow who spoke in response to our final panel. Everyone is a stakeholder in education. Every single one of us in society is a consumer of education in some way, shape, or form. And within this room, there are people who represent teaching, who are paying students, who are enablers of the education system, who work at universities, who teach other educators. And the question I have, given that each of us is a stakeholder in the education system, is how are we acting with intention? To not only, or to not, I should say, uphold the status quo, but to actively deconstruct it in a way that can allow those around us to recognize what really matters and can accelerate the conversations about what really matters in education. If you work for a university, perhaps you're an admissions officer. If you are asked, I know there are admissions officers in the audience. If you are in a conversation at final committee and asked, why is this student admissible to my university? how do you answer? Do you answer in a way that's consistent with the status quo, in which you lay out a set of scores and performance on metrics that in essence have been systematically dismantled over the course of the past 9 hours? Or do you answer with evidence of the person's character, their grit, the projects they have achieved, the projects they have developed, the things they have done that have demonstrated what they can do and why they will be successful, not only in your university, which is a temporary stop on a much longer journey of life, but in all the other things that they will be doing in their life. If you are a parent, or you're someone who leads a school, as I do, and someone else asks you for advice on a school and says, hey, is school X a good school? Would that be a good school for my child? Do you respond by talking about the school's pass rate? Or do you respond by talking about the way in which the school engages in the work of learning? Do you talk about the way in which the school honors and invests in the important work of teaching? Do you talk about the way in which the students choose to collaborate with each other and are challenged to do authentic work that matters and build projects of deep importance? I'm probably asked about a school once a week. How am I answering those questions? When you are choosing a school for your child, when you're visiting a university, what do you look for and how do you have a conversation with your child about what matters to them? When you're choosing a course for yourself to continue on the professional journey, how are you choosing that course? When you're engaging in work as a minister of ICT, how do you think of your work as serving a higher purpose of skills development in your country? I hope all of us will take something important that will shape the way in which we will engage as stakeholders in the education system, in the conversations we have later this afternoon, but more importantly, in the days to come, and that we will work together to shine a light on things that work, and that we will work together to improve the quality of education for all, regardless of the land of their birth or the situation into which they are born. And I thank the European Parliament, and in particular, Amjad Bashir, for making this event possible for all of us today. Thank you all very much. It is time for cocktails.